can get started.
Okay, can you hear me now? That sounds like I can hear me. All right. Last month we showed a piece like this. It's parallel axes and arc-type cuts. So that was last month. This month we're doing something more like this. These are twisted axes and cylindrical cuts. You took it all the way down to a cylinder and then cut a shape into it. And then we're also going to show you how I did the top here, because I did the top with different, totally differently. Actually did this in a chuck. So we'll show that too. These others are done between centers, but this was done in a chuck. So first I want to talk about how you, with the twisted axes, if you use 3 axes, you want them to be 120 degrees apart. And if you go to simple geometry, there's a very easy and accurate way to get that 120 degree angle. And I've got this bigger piece of wood that hopefully it's for you to see it better. And the first thing I'm going to do, since I had this between centers, I have a center point. So I can go ahead, and as long as I mark right through that center point, then I've got this divided into halves. Then I'm going to take a compass and scribe a circle that's going to be where I would put my centers on. So let's see what I'm doing here. Okay. So then I'll take one of these points first and keep the compass at the very same distance or radius here. Make a mark here on this side, there on that side. Then I go from those 2 marks and make 2 more marks. And then if I want to check it for accuracy, I go to this opposite center line and I get 2 more marks. So now if I go from my center line through those 2 marks, between here, here, and here, those are all 120 degree angles. So are there any questions there? It's a really simple way to do it. I used to try to use a protractor, and that was not fun. So, any questions? Okay. Turn it over. Do the same thing. What I do is when I'm turning this between centers, and I already turned off the center point on this side, and I'll take the tool rest and make a mark. Well, yeah, that shows it real well. And then I would put my center line with that mark, turn it over in this center line with this mark. And then the rest of it's all the same. Any other questions? So So now if I have my piece like this, I'm going to do the same thing, but it's not going to be quite as easy to see. Partly because this is not much more than 1/4 of an inch that I'm going to have my my 3 different centers. So I'm going to make my circle. My center lines. Let's see, where am I? So then I can go ahead and punch my 3 centers in here. And I'm going to mark this. This is going to be the headstock. And I'm going to mark them. And I just do this consistently the same way. It's less confusing in the long run if you do a consistent pattern of how you do things with these, because it can really get confusing, especially as you do more things with it. And in this particular case, I'm going to use the 3 different centers on the headstock, but I'm only going to use 1 center on the tailstock. But it's still going to be a twisted because your centers are not parallel. Let me see, let me think. I'm going to put it between centers real quick, and I'm going to mark some space on either end, because if I was going to make specific shapes on either end or go down to a tenon to put it into a base or something like that, I want to make sure I got room to do those kind of things out here, and all my other shapes will be within those 2 lines, or at least I won't be too far outside of those lines.
How small is your driving your light center?
1/2 inch. Yeah, they're 1/2 inch stub centers. Let's see. So I'm done with that stuff for now. Okay, I'm going to try to, I'm going to go to my number 1 here. What's that? Oh, I don't think so. It'll be all right. Okay, I set up my tool rest so that I make sure that I'm clearing all the way around. And I'm also going to try to be parallel to the bedways. That's just another thing that is a good habit to be into for a lot of things. It's a lot easier to, if I'm making this round especially, to have it parallel, then I just have to go along and I know when I'm pretty much the same diameter all the way across.
How do you set the height of the tool rest? What do you set it at?
I set the height of the tool rest so that my cutting edge is where I want it to be. So
On center?
usually it's a little below center. I'm going to be cutting a little above center. But it's, I just kind of set it, and then if things aren't working right, I adjust it. Let me see this again. Okay. Now I'm going to turn this, what's going to seem like it's very fast, but with the general rules on how fast you should go with a particular diameter. A 2-inch diameter, you can go between 2,000 and 3,000 RPM, and it's considered safe. And even if you consider the wobble at maybe a 3-inch diameter, still 2,000 RPM is safe enough, and I probably won't get up that high.
Make it easier to turn if you have a
The higher speed makes it easier to get clean cuts more than anything. That you're not seeing the gaps in the air and the wood are not near as far apart the faster you go. So the first shape I'm going to make is this ball on the bottom. And I'm going to kind of eyeball that line that I'm seeing there. And I'm just going to start making V cuts. And you can see from the ghost wood, I hope you can see, that I got quite a ways to go. Plus I also have to come wide enough to make that ball shape. And I'm making very small cuts, so that's another thing that makes it so that it's relatively safe because I'm not making big cuts. And when you're cutting beads and coves and things, you don't make big cuts, you kind of sneak up on the shape. So you can see I'm getting real close on this side. I've got a ways to go on that side to actually get this to a cylinder. And I also need to widen this out. Can you hear me all right through the... Okay, good. Okay, so I'm at my cylinder on both sides, but I want to cut deeper. I want to cut a little wider, and I also want to cut deeper so that I have a surface here that you'll see in a minute here. Go just a little deeper. Okay. So you see I've got this angle right here, and that's important, but you'll see in a minute why that is there. So now I can make my bead shape. And again, you sneak up on a bead, you don't really cut everything all at once. And I want this last line here to be very defined. So I want a real definite line in there. I don't want any whiskers in there if I can help it. And that's the shape I want. Now, this is the last time anytime I rechuck things, these lines won't be in exactly the same place. So I really need to do any sanding I'm going to do it now. And since this is a cylinder, I can go ahead and sand with it turning, where with this shape I couldn't do that. I had to do all hand sanding because it wasn't turning in a cylinder. So the way I'm going to do that, I'm going to slow it down. And I'm going to rest my elbow here so that I don't subconsciously let my elbow drop and get into any problem in there. And I'm going to sand on this far side. And if you got good clean cuts, you don't have to do a lot of sanding.
What grit is that?
This is 220. And I could have spent a little more time on that bead, but. And I also want to sand that flat spot that I had there. Anyway, no one wants to watch me sand, so we'll call it good. And I would go through at least to 400, go through the grits, but I'm not going to do that tonight. So now I'm ready to go to my next center. So I'm going to go to number 2. Any questions so far? And I'm going to start the same way with V-cuts. So what I'm eventually going to look at is try to get a disc in here, and I'm going to have to cut back to where there's none of this flat spot in there. So I still got a little bit to go there. But this is where that flat spot that I put in there comes into play. And if I make that too small, then this disc that I end up with is a lot less defined. And I can kind of see a ghost image up in here of where I need to cut to, but I also can take a look here and see, well, I got to go, and I can kind of eyeball how much further back I need to go there. Just a tiny flat spot there, but I'm down to my cylinder here, so I need to go a little farther, but I'm getting there. And again, I have to widen it out to get to the size bead I want. Okay, so I got a good sharp line all the way around here, and I'm to a cylinder on both sides. Again, I want to have a flat spot in here, but I'm ready to turn the bead. You can see I happen to switch hands when I turn beads. I know if you're strictly right-handed or left-handed, you have to change the tool instead, but I've always found it easier to do it this way. And this is also where I mentioned last month, practicing your beads. The last thing you want to do is learn how to make a bead at the same time that this is going around and you know, at all different speeds. And I know when I first was turning beads, you'd get a catch and you'd pull back and get scared, and you'd grip it tighter and shove it right back in there. Not the way to do it. Just take your time. Have enough tool control that you're not scared to be turning a bead, you're not scared that you're going to have a catch, and then go ahead and, again, I'm working small sections at a time also. So I'm I'm going to clean up these very corners a little bit yet. And it's a good thing it's a practice piece because I'm hurrying a little bit. Okay, so now we're ready to go again to the third axis. And this time I'm going to make another disc like that, but I'm not going to make another bead. Okay, so I've got my sharp corners here. I still need to get rid of this part in here. Okay, just need to clean up the bottom part of this V cut now. Okay. Any questions? Now I'm going to go back to my number one. Since I only had 3 centers, I have to go back to something. So. A little more to go there. Okay, so that's how you can then get two discs next to each other. And then from here, I can go ahead and either put it back between centers and do something with both these ends, put a tenon on them or whatever. Decide how I want to finish it from there. So that's this part of it. Any questions there? Like I said, good thing it's a practice piece. So now, don't want to do that yet. So now I'm going to take a small piece here. I'm not sure if that's poplar or cottonwood or something. It's a very soft wood, but it does cut pretty clean. So I said I'm going to put this into a chuck, so I need to have a tenon on the end there. Make sure I don't get too small. I'm going to make this tenon a little longer than I normally make tenons. Yeah, that'll do. And I'm going to make another line on here just for reference later, like I did on the ends of the other ones. First, I'm still going to have 3 different centers on this, so I'm going to go back to making my 120-degree angles.
You gonna do more than 3?
I haven't. 3 is a real common number for a lot of art type stuff. And
Do 4 or?
yeah, I think you can try whatever you want. How successful it ends up is the question. Let's see what I do with my. And I usually put a different center line than you can see the lines that I used to try to get the center of the block that I started with. But that can always be a little bit off. So I try to make new lines when I'm doing this. Okay. And because the compass doesn't always sit in that center point the same as it sits when you, so if I get an X that's not quite on the circle, I just divide it in half and punch my centers from there. It's close enough for wood turning. And in this case, I'm not going to punch centers. What I'm going to do is take my 3 angles and I'm going to mark them on the tenon. Let's see. Here I had 1, 2, and 3. So I'm going to put 1, 2, and 3. Now, anyone that I've ever taught to do tenons, you know, I'm a real stickler for it. The tenon has to be exactly this and that, and it has to go firmly against the front side of the. So when I I've seen other people do this with off-center turnings where you just cock the, and I would never do that with a big piece of wood. This is a small piece, or if I did, I would make sure I'd have the tailstock in there too. But this is a small piece, it's pretty light, so what I'm going to do is go to my number 1, and I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, I put a white line in the middle of one of my jaws just as a reference line. So I'm going to take my number 1 and line it up with that line. And then I wanted some consistency with how far I cocked it out there. So I decided to take an Allen wrench, stick it in there. Tighten down on one side. And then if I go 180 degrees, I do want it to go up against the jaw on the other side there.
This is the poor man that set free.
Yep. Well, like I said, I wasn't sure I wanted to do that, except I wanted to be able to go all the way off the end here. And with the way they did it between centers, you got that big chunk out here. So you can't really do that. So that's why I'm doing this. I wanted the lid to kind of go and have the same kind of feel that the bottom of the box. This is a box up in here. So. Any questions so far? Okay. What's that?
Did you ever have one come off?
Not that I've done. In the past, I've had the little ones that I've done that are really off. I had one come out of there once, and it just kind of dropped down, fortunately. But yeah, I haven't recently had any of them come off. And I'm basically going to do the same thing I was doing with the other one. I'm going to just start making V-cuts. You know what I didn't do? And I'm going to do that quick. I'm going to put it back flat there. And I'm going to make this into a little bit of a cone. And that is, it makes it easier to have the 3 different rings get a little smaller as they go out if I put the cone on there first. Now hopefully I can line it up pretty close to what it was. I don't know. I just picked one out that I thought wasn't too big and wasn't too small. It's probably written on here. then again, it's not. A lot of this stuff, you just have to try.
Yeah.
That's why I make a lot of practice pieces and just see how it works out and then go from there. So, I'm going to go to a different gouge. It's a little pointier, gets into these tighter spots, but it's also grabbier, so. Again, I want a nice sharp V. That's got a little whisker to it. And like the other one, I'd want to sand here if I was going to do sanding on it, because you'll never get it exactly the same spot in order to sand it later. So now I'll go to number 2 and line that mark up. Again, make sure I'm tight up against the jaw on the other side. I'm going to turn this a little bit. So this is real similar to when I was making the two discs next to each other on the other turning. I got good sharp corners everywhere. I just have to clean up the bottom of the V here. So now we'll go to number 3. And same thing, different spot. Here. Just a little bit. Go a little deeper. That little catch will be gone later. Okay. Now we're real quick going to go back to number 1. And this time I'm just going to take it all the way off the end, so. A little closer. Yeah, we're going to leave it at that. You all got the idea, right? Oops. Okay, any other questions?
Do you just chuck it back up and then turn the insert for it to fit in the box?
Yeah, what I did with that one was I've got this tenon real close to what I wanted it to be, and I actually turned a little bead kind of on there. And I had rounded the bottom here a little bit, but this tenon was longer, and I actually put it between centers because I still had the center there, and used a rubber chucky thing that's kind of a soft rubberish, and used that and just centered it the best I could, and got a good tenon on there, and got it cut it down where I wanted it, and then I fit the opening on the box to this tenon, rather than a lot of times you do it the other way around.
How do you do the box on the top? Or is that a completely different issue?
No, I started with a whole lot longer piece, and so I actually did this first, and I did it wrong. I should have made the box first, because it was real hard. When it got this small, it was real hard to hollow it later. And if I did it again, I would make the box and then put a tenon on here and and or put a tenon on the box and put it insert it into this shape rather than the way I did it. Especially with this being so round, and the way that you have to cut this way, I had to go way in there because of the angles. Otherwise, I'd get a flat spot on the bottom of here. So I wouldn't do it this way again.
So that's a solid piece.
This is a solid. Well, the base, the very bottom base, is separate. But this whole thing is, yes, one solid piece. But yeah, it was a real bear to hollow it. And a lot of sanding on the inside to hollow it.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
All right.